Alright, so I'm recording this mostly for a friend of mine. Let's see if I can put this up somewhere. Yeah. Um, as I said, I'm recording this for a friend of mine because I just came to a realization that I actually wanted to kind of share a bit more publicly. And oh, it is uncomfortable. It's also not fun, but it's actually needed. And I probably should have added this to my topic with the whole relationships. But since I didn't, I have to actually do this differently. So I'm going to dedicate an entire segment for it and it alone. I think I will just simply label this as messed up. But I will use the F word instead with an apostrophe in the middle. Something in the middle there. Because, in all honesty, I definitely be sending more information along to him in PM outside of this. But just to keep things simple, I will keep the private stuff out of here because, privacy matters. But for the topic on hand here, if you, the conversation itself was revolving around love dolls or sex dolls. And okay, how do I proceed here? Give me a second. Yeah, keeping things normal and keeping things the way they, would replicate in real life is what you should be going for if that is a direction you want to go down. Because, in short, relationships are hard to find, they are hard to maintain, and there is always a cost, as well as the fact that if both people are not putting out a, commitment, it's most likely going to fail. Now, when it comes down to an individual level, since everyone has a sex life, let's just say feminism has actually gotten in the way of relationships, so to speak, because if women, unfortunately, this is a very unfortunate thing, but when women actually have money, it's like the relationship itself struggles, if not suffers outright. Now, I want to say to the point of it just simply disappearing. On the other hand, well, there's a lot of talk that goes on with responsibility and what women and what men want. On an individual level, this is all up for speculation as well as of the individuals themselves. But the topic itself was how far you should go inside with, in your personal life if you were to be having a love doll, so to speak. I don't want to go into specifications there as far as within the conversation itself, but this is something that interested me that made me realize this was worth talking about. You want to keep things, how do I put it? If you go beyond into something that is not normal, so to speak, something that is weird, I guess, as I tell others, there is normal, and then there is not normal, and then there's, weird, which is on the fringes, the outreach. So, sex dolls itself is something that's been on the rise because relationships have been failing in the past 20 or 30 years. They just consecutively keep getting worse and worse, and men have looked for alternatives to these relationships. In my pursuit of looking for a relationship and asking these questions why they're not working, starting off with me and then going outside, I ended up coming across this as well as the BDSM community. In short, there's a lot there to be talked about. I may end up labeling this as like sex dolls or something like that. We'll see. I'll come up with a decent name at the end. This is just me running some thoughts out loud on this topic here. But in short, you want to keep things either with a masculine or a feminine body and not deviate from that, because if you do, emotionally attaching to someone or something else can have serious consequences. It's the same thing as, masturbating and not in either using wrong material or no material, because you could inadvertently attach to what you are using to release to, so to speak. I've had this topic before with others, and frankly, doesn't make me feel that awkward talking about it, because the more I talk about it, the better I find ways to talk about it. Now, because of my lack of boundaries when it comes to conversations and with these difficult topics, I can actually do a somewhat decent job. So, in short, as what another good friend of mine told me about, basically you attach to whatever you have sex with, or whatever has sex with you. And unfortunately, that is how some unhealthy and abusive relationships can actually start. And I want to point out the case with pimps and escorts and all of that, because the whole thing about abuse, and then you're not worth anything to anyone else, and pointing out to sexual value and all of that. It's a very damaging relationship. Let me see here. That's just an example, though. But in short, this whole conversation is basically about my thoughts on sex dolls and all of that. I want to say the further you deviate, and I'm talking about going into fantasy models, fantasy types. For example, Avatar 2 just came out. When the first Avatar movie dropped, there was a lot of activity in the various different communities, as well as on Pornhub and other places like that. And you could actually see how this was very enticing to other people, just because it was, different. It was quote unquote new, hot, whatever. But in short, there is a curiosity to know and to have more, and that can easily get out of control and turn into lust and addiction, idols, strongholds. But for those who are spiritual, strongholds and idols definitely matter, because they become number one in your life, or they become number two in your life. Putting someone or something up on a pedestal that you just chase after. Now, the difference between emulating someone and pursuing the valuable qualities and whatever else that they have that you want, the difference is trying to be like them versus trying to be validated by them. A bit complicated thoughts there, but it's important, because validation is a serious issue in today's youth. It looks differently for both sexes, though. For those who are non-binary, those who are trans, the validation itself is going to go through an entirely different method, if my understanding is correct. And that is not entirely helpful to them or everyone else on the outside, especially those who are very, I don't want to say loud, but for those who are very vocal online in these communities. It's like there's a lot of words that are being said, but very little that's being clarified or understood as far as to the audience or to the individual who's actually talking, because there's a lot of work that goes into working through some of the stuff. So in short, I'm just trying to tie this back to my original thought about, for sex dolls and love dolls. I think people prefer love dolls because when you're looking up online, love dolls adds a lot more to the conversation itself, because they could be companions. They could be a lot more than just simply something you have sex with. Now, the idea of using a companion to help take space up in your life where there is no actual lover or spouse or partner is something that I want to say is needed, because we are built for relationships, or at least at the very least a social interaction with others. And in light, or if that's not there, it could help simulate that, which in it of itself is valuable. I want to say some people ended up going insane just because of the lack of that, but I don't have any examples, and I don't want to just simply say that offhand. If I say stuff like that, I want to actually have there be examples to back it up. Now, I do want to say that not everyone uses dolls in the same way or even goes after the same type out there. I don't want to break down into types, but that does play a somewhat important factor. Because some people I think there's something called waifus, and I think husbandos, and it's basically like the male version. I'm not exactly 100% accurate on this stuff, but it's interesting, it's different for sure, but it's a growing part in our lives, so to speak, simply because the lack of relationships are not there. They're just simply not there, and people are looking for alternatives. And not everyone has a kink or a fetish either, so it's like they don't really feel a part of the adult community. They don't have these interests, so it's like they feel left out. And also, to be fair, for these adult communities, it's recommended you show up with a partner to these events. Yes, I've been to, I want to say, at least 2 events. Yeah, they're kind of extreme. Knife play and needlework. I have not been to any other classes, but I would like to in the future. And I definitely can say there is no God. Or rather, let me rephrase that. If God is here, he is nowhere to be found in anything like that which I had witnessed. And this is a bit more of a humorous side topic, but going through the classes and sitting in the back, just listening and eating some of the snacks that were provided there, while hearing this guy scream who's on a table, for needles. Because, him and the woman that he was talking to, she was disabled, by the way. She was using a cane. But, a cane to walk around, move around, not to go hit anyone with. Very gentle old lady, and she and I had a decent conversation afterwards. But the guy himself was in a relationship with her, and I don't know to what extent. I really don't know, and I don't want to know. But since she was practicing on him and using him as an example, yeah, it was extremely unpleasant going through that. Anyway, just using that to show why you'd want to show up to events, why it's encouraged that you show up to these adult events with a partner. I'm not trying to go into all that. And frankly, I haven't really talked about that because there's no way to talk about it. And there's no relevant topics to talk about that with. But, as I said, this is something that popped up that I do want to talk to my friend about. The personal aspect will remain personal, but this part is basically very simple. You deviate from what is normal. You are risking complications that you may not be prepared to handle. And I'm not simply talking about the different gadgets you can add to any of these love bots, love dolls, love bots, whatever you want to call them. I meant to say love dolls, but whatever. There's just, when you are going beyond what is normal, you're just risking a lot more than what you're prepared to handle. And frankly, sometimes there is a price to pay that you don't realize it until 10 or 20 years later down the road, when you frankly derailed and changed your ability to even pair bond with anyone else to begin with. That's why you need to be careful with who and what you attach to. Simply because I believe it's referred that people's sex engines, basically, the more you rev them, the more content you need. But also, the more you add to it, the more you can change it, so to speak. Yeah, frustrating topic, I know. This isn't something I actually wanted to talk about, but since it popped up and it's relevant, yeah, I'm going to talk about it. And the church doesn't talk about this. They would rather talk about marriage and the good, honorable, godly qualities that are there and the relationship between the church and the people. I get it. You probably get it, and the church definitely gets it. But realistically, marriage itself is looking more and more like it is something to be avoided just because of the problems and issues that pop up. And I'm not talking about as a whole in the society, because that's already an issue with, introducing social media and dating apps. That has significantly impacted the way we handle our relationships and the way we even it impacts whether or not they succeed or fail. And for the most part, from what I heard, it makes them fail. I grew up believing that marriage was something to aim for and that it was a goal. The fact that it took me around 4 years to change that perspective, there's a lot that went in those 4 years from 2017 to 2021. A lot. And some of the men's groups that I was in got hit pretty hard. Yeah, I want to curse when I say that, but I just want to point out that there is a lot of crap that happened. A lot of issues that popped up that I saw and witnessed and felt, because when I brought some of this stuff up in other conversations, I got kicked out. I got basically persecuted and all of that. And it really was frustrating all around. So, yeah. Anyway, I think I said enough with the message for you to get what I was trying to say. And, wow. I'm going to go talk to my friend and send him a message and just let him know as far as with this little clip here and with the personal aspect here, just because it's actually important. He's a good friend of mine, and I enjoy talking to him. Now, to be clear, I have a lot of friends, and I want things to remain vague on purpose just to avoid any sort of issues, and I don't want to break anyone's trust who is a friend of mine. Now, I want to say some things are from the past that I do feel is acceptable to talk about just because they're no longer relevant, and more likely than not, there are lessons there to be told even if they are over 20 years old. Up to 20 years old. I should leave it like that. I've had quite a few stories that I would like to share when they are relevant at the time, because there is lessons here that are actually they are actually valuable. All right, until next time.